Hello, everybody. I think we'll get started. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum for Fargo Legislative District 21. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We also work to increase the understanding of major public policy issues. We thank the City of Fargo for allowing us to use the City Commission chamber for this forum. And we also want to express our great thanks to all the city employees who assisted us in the setup and videotaping of tonight's event. The forum will air on public access to widen the number of voters who can see and hear the candidates. On behalf of the League, I also thank the candidates for attending and the members of the audience for their participation. Here's how the forum, like all of our candidate forums, will operate. Audience members have been given note cards to write questions for our candidates. Once you have written your question, just hold it up in the air and one of our volunteers will collect it. You may submit as many questions as you wish, but please only put one question per card. After each candidate gives her 1.5-minute intro, does that seem reasonable? I will start with the first question, and then these questions are edited for clarity, so repetition of questions and each time. If you need me to repeat the question at any time, please let me know. We'll do that before your clock starts. Each candidate will then get 2 minutes to answer each question, so please watch the signs. You all know how those work. And then we will continue to ask questions until the time for each candidate is to give a 1.5-minute closing statement. We will get to as many questions as we can, but we cannot guarantee all questions will be asked. We'll begin with introductions. We'll just go left to right, and 1.5 minutes, and we'll let you begin. Lori Beth.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for the League of Women Voters for all the efforts that they've put to host this great event tonight so that we all have a chance to share our ideas, our issues, and respond to those issues with the citizens of Fargo, both who are here tonight. Thank you all, and for anyone who visits us on the the TV circuit. I'm Lori Beth Hager. I've lived in Fargo for 20 years and the Hawthorne neighborhood for 15 years. My professional experience was in higher ed administration at Mayville State, Minot State, and the University of Mary. I kind of like that M thing. I've worked in various areas of student affairs, starting from residence life to admissions counseling, and then more of my specialty was working with freshmen in counseling issues, trying to get new students planted, putting their roots down, letting them engage and enjoy college and start on their future. And that's sort of what I see my role as a legislature and our role as people working in government, starting our future, planting our future, and making the dreams of our youth come true. I'm a mother, a daughter, and a neighbor, and I cherish each of those roles that I have had. I believe that's what it takes to be a person that listens with a degree in counseling. That's what it is to listen, and I think that's what being a representative in Bismarck is what I need to do and what we as citizens need in Bismarck, to listen to our issues, to listen to the concerns, and to take them and make government work for the people. My priorities will be fighting for you and your future, prioritizing people's needs over corporate interest, protecting our land, our water, our air, advocating for more affordable health care and insurance, supporting inclusive and welcoming communities, striving for individual and financial security, and of course higher education is a very passionate part of my life and a high priority for me.
Very good. Thank you, Lori Beth. And now we have Kathy Hogan, who is a Senate candidate this year. Kathy.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the City of Fargo and to Cable Access for broadcasting tonight's session. I'm Kathy Hogan, and I've been honored to serve as the representative from District 21 for the last 9 years. My husband Dennis and I have lived in the Hawthorne neighborhood for 47 years. We raised our children there. It's really deeply home. I volunteered in the community in many capacities over the years. I taught religious ed at St. Anthony's. I was a Girl Scout leader for 12 years, all 12 years. And I've served on the Fargo Cass Public Health Board and another 14 to 16 not-for-profit boards over the years. I've also was the director of Cass County Social Services, and all of those experiences really have taught me how to listen to complex issues. We have to look at issues from many different points of view. We have to develop critical relationship with key partners, and the things I learned in my community work really also apply to the legislative process. You really need to know how to build consensus around issues. If I'm elected, I plan on addressing the following issues. The first issue I'm committed to is to continuing the work that we've done in behavioral health. For the last 4 years, we've had a major initiative, and I always say it's a 10,000-piece puzzle, and we have 2,000 pieces in it. We have a long way to go yet. I think we need to expand and improve early childhood services and opportunities. We need to clearly, appropriately fund education, which is the backbone of every society. I think we should consider eliminating income tax on Social Security and veterans benefits, because we're one of the few states that tax those things. And we have to restore our efforts to lower property tax. It's an unfair tax. My goal as a legislator is to improve the lives of all North Dakotans, rich and poor, east and west, urban and rural, not just for today, but also for all generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And now Mary Schneider.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the wonderful members of the community who came here tonight. I'm Mary Schneider, and along with Representative Kathy Hogan and the retiring Senator Carolyn Nelson, I represent District 21, the heart of Fargo, in the North Dakota Legislature. It's a privilege and honor to serve the people of District 21, and I would like to continue to do that. You're in District 21 right now. Welcome. And know that you're in a very special place that has a wide range of people, businesses, entertainment, culture, and issues. I was born in Fargo and am a graduate of NDSU. So is my husband of 45 years, Mark. Since graduation, I've had a variety of experiences and a chance to live in other states and see how things are done there. I've been a police officer in Colorado, a social services caseworker in metropolitan Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, and a criminal justice researcher and mental health worker in Maryland. We moved back to District 21 in 1978 and bought the house we continue to live in today. We've raised 2 children, Mac and Libby. They're graduates of the district's neighborhood schools and both live in District 21 now with their families. They enjoy the treasures of our area, the downtown parks, arts and culture, the entertainment and small businesses as much as I do. We're all part of a much bigger 4-generation Schneider family, which has all lived and worked right here in District 21, many at the Schneider Law Firm, one of the district's prevalent small businesses. I'm only the 3rd Schneider to serve in this position in the North Dakota House behind John Schneider and his son Jasper. I've walked every block in District 21. I love it and its people, and I want to continue to assist both. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to serve on a number of area boards, including the YWCA, the FM Community Theater, Soroptimist, and CHI Friendship. I enjoyed working with the Fargo Public Schools as the PTA president and as chair of junior grade books. As an attorney and executive director of Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota for 24 years, I developed programs and services that directly impacted the lives of working families, women, abuse victims, children, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. My background has equipped me to effectively and powerfully advocate for District 21 in the legislature. I've served on the House Tax Committee, Human Services Committee, Government and Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Interim Judiciary and Health Services Committees, and 2 joint Senate-House committees concerning state employee contributions and benefits. I'm also on the task force to prevent sexual abuse of children. I want to continue to use my experiences, my education, and leadership to address the needs of District 21's workers, seniors, families, small businesses, arts, and educational systems. I want to ensure that the state doesn't squander or surrender its prosperity through irresponsible governance and guarantee that it shares that prosperity with the people. I will continue to fight for equal access to opportunity, expansion of good jobs, growth of the workforce and support for workers, affordable housing, sustained and significant property tax relief, and access to health care. I want quality education from pre-K through 12th grade and additional funding and respect for higher education, also assistance with student debt. I'll continue to promote expansion and adequate funding for a range of behavioral health services and help to those with special needs, like seniors, children, veterans, and persons with disabilities. There's much to do, and we need skilled, educated, experienced, and empathetic advocates with strong abilities, strong ethics, and values to get the job done. I like to apply for the job.
Thank you, ladies. A little bit before we get started with questions, it should be noted that all candidates have been invited to tonight's forum. My job is not to editorialize or sway answers or pick questions that may favor any candidate. I've grouped them together. The questions have been gathered from audience members, and they have voluntarily submitted them. So like I said, there are a couple common themes here. So I think we talked a lot about what you would like to do, so now we're going to get into the how we're going to do it, right? So since we started with Lori Beth, the next question will start with Kathy, and you will have 2 minutes, as I mentioned, to answer those questions, and we're going to hit it hard right off the bat, because this is about the North Dakota measures. So North Dakota voters will vote on 3 initiated measures, well, 4. What is your position on each one? Number 1 is the Ethics Commission. Number 2 is qualification to vote. Number 3 is legalizing marijuana. And number 4 is special license plates. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you, Robin. Initiated measures are really a privilege, and I think something we should all really look at. In terms of the Ethics Commission, I'm strongly backing that particular measure. For the last 4 sessions, there has been a bill introduced to establish an Ethics Commission. Most states in this nation have ethics commissions, and I think the initiated measure came about because we haven't acted as a legislature. And as I read the initiated measure, it defines the basic structure, but the actual kinds of activities that would be covered will be legislative. So it's an interesting balance in this initiated measure between the legislature will define some of the criteria, but the basic structure of the commission is defined. I think we need this in this day. Over the last 3 or 4 months, we've been trying to establish a workplace harassment policy in the state of North Dakota. Those are often covered in Ethics Commission policies, and that would give us an opportunity to have a neutral third party investigate allegations, and so that's one of the issues. Measure 2 changes the definition of a citizen for voting. I think the current Constitution, as it was originally written, is very clear. It changes 2 words, and I think it's totally unnecessary. So personally, I'm voting no on Measure 2 because it does nothing. The legalizing marijuana is a more complex issue, and I haven't made a decision about what I'm doing on that because I think ideally I support legalizing recreational marijuana, but I think legislatively would be more effective. And so I think if it passes, we will in fact have to legislate on it. But I think it's more effective on a complex issue to do it legislatively rather than by measure. The last one is the license plate issues, which is originally many people think that this would let someone have a license if they were an emergency volunteer. The thing that was an unintended consequence, perhaps, is it also eliminates all of the registration fees for cars for if you're an emergency volunteer. So there's a very large fiscal note. There's a large cost to this that I think many of the people who signed didn't realize. And so because we have such a tight budget, It's I think a $3.5 or $4 million, and perhaps Mary knows that because she's more detailed than I am. But there's a large fiscal note on this particular measure, and that's a concern. It doesn't just give them the license plate, it waives their registration fees permanently, and so that's a real concern. And so that's a tough one because we need to honor our volunteer fire people and first responders, but I don't know if the cost is worth it. So that's the 4.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Mary, what is your position on the 4 different initiated measures? Would you like me to rename them? I didn't think so. Thank you.
The initial ethics bill is something that means a lot to me. When I first was elected, I contacted the Secretary of State's office because I couldn't find a place to put in the expenses of my campaign. I kept trying on their form and I couldn't get it through. And when I called the Secretary of State's office, they laughed at me. They said, you don't have to report your expenses. You don't have to do that. So one of my first bills in the legislature was an ethics bill. It was to establish an ethics commission or committee because we were the only state that did not have one or the other as a means of enforcing and ensuring ethics. So after that, I tried other ethics bills as well, but just let me give you a little idea of the ones that were suggested at the legislature and were denied, voted down by the GOP majority. Here's just a few of them. Barring candidates from using campaign funds for personal uses, requiring legislative candidates to report contributions in the same manner as statewide candidates, mandating that candidates disclose all expenditures in excess of $200, requiring the disclosure of any scholarships granted to legislators by lobbyists. Those are all voted down. And I think there's a critical need to ensure that if we want people to have faith in government, that we need to make sure that it is ethical. On the second ballot measure, I'm voting no. I think it's mean-spirited and I won't lend any credence to it. On the license plates, I would like to be able to, support and commend the volunteers in our state. But when we have a budget shortfall, perhaps we need to balance the considerations of the funding costs of that with maybe some other methods where we can do that. On legalizing marijuana, that's a really tough choice. I'm quite upset that medical marijuana is not ready yet for people who are in pain every day to be able to use it. We were promised to have medical marijuana within a year of testimony in front of the committee that I serve upon, and we still don't have it. So I can see frustration in the voters with that dereliction of duty by the health department and others to get the medical marijuana program up and running. But I was also a police officer and trained in some of the negatives that come from making substances too available that might be mind-altering or otherwise cause legal problems too. So I'm still struggling with that one. Did I get 4?
You did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And Lori Beth.
The initiation-aided measures process in North Dakota is one of the most fabulous things when the people get to put their name and sign on the clipboard and let their voices and feel like they're an active part of the government. So we have 4 wonderful, wonderful measures this year. People have want to bring them to the public, and I'll talk a little bit about each of them. As many things, kind of a disclaimer first, people might not always get it right when they put it on that clipboard, and maybe some people that are a little more aware and fine-tune things can have some input as well. So my thoughts on the Ethics Commission, I think every day when we turn on the national news, we see more and more of a reason to know that we need to do this at home too, that we need to have people that are in government and official business feel accountable, so that there's some transparency about what we do when we're in government, and that the citizens can feel that the people that they're electing to serve them are going to be accountable in their expenditures, in who they take money from. And that's what the Ethics Commission is for us as citizens, to know that the people that we're electing value where they're getting money from and who's trying to influence them. And I think it's a very important measure. It's beautiful how this one was determined. It was a group of people in Bismarck that got together and refined things. One of the people on the committee is a very policy-driven person, and I respect Ellen Chaffee very much, having worked for her and with her at Mayville State University. So I really think that that group of people really worked together well to figure out how to make that measure as a way for us to be more accountable as elected officials. The second one is citizenship. My perspective on that comes from being the person who worked Election Day a couple of times at the primaries. Asking a person if they're a citizen, is there anybody in this room that can prove that you're a citizen? What card will you pull out of your pocket that will show you that you are a citizen? Maybe none of us in this room would get asked that question on Election Day, because as I look out there, we all have Scandinavian skin tones. So, but if that person doesn't have Scandinavian skin tones, they might be pulled aside and asked to prove something that the rest of us can't prove. And so I think that measure, we don't need to include that language in there. It is a way that might fine-tune and lead to voter suppression. So I think that citizenship measure isn't one that I will be voting yes on for those reasons I just stated. The special license plates, I'll skip ahead to 4 and come back to 3. The special license plates, as I started looking at that a little more closely, the expenditures on that, maybe not the best way to honor our people that are volunteering in emergency capacities in the state. A lot of different things got lumped into that measure, like free admission to parks and the expenditures. So I'm not sure that that's exactly the best, at this time of budgetary problems in North Dakota, that is the best way to be expending that money. And finally, the legalization of marijuana. This is kind of I am very curious to see what the voters of our state, what that vote will come out on election night. And I can't predict what that one's going to be. Having gone door to door for the past 2 or 3 months, I don't get a feel from the people in District 21 whether they're for or against the legalization of marijuana or the recreational marijuana. So I'll be very curious to see as to what that is. I do believe that there will be a lot of parameters, should that pass, that we need to be working on in Bismarck to refine and get that. That's one of the measures I think that might be, as a people-driven measure, that there might be a lot more work to be done on that. And so I'm very curious to see as to what the voters will be. As a representative, what that vote comes out in the state will determine how my processing in Bismarck and how that work will go about. So I'm very curious about that. As a counselor, as a mother, and as someone who grew up with marijuana being a gateway drug, I have a lot of back and forth feelings on that particular measure.
Thank you. Question number 2 is about our state and local finances. The next question will be started with Mary. What can the state of North Dakota do to control increasing property taxes? Old people are being taxed out of their homes.
Thank you for that question. That's a really good question. Property tax is the one tax that people seem to agree we should be holding down. And I think that we certainly could do that if we kept our promises and had good governance and sensible decision-making at the state level. We had in place a 12% buy-down where the state would buy down a portion of the costs. And in the last session, because of the budget shortfall, we switched and picked up some of the social services, which was not the same amount overall as what the 12% buy down was. So we really broke up a promise to our people. And the reason we did it was because we were short of funds. And the reason we were short of funds was because we have what I call the Great North Dakota Giveaway in the prior session. We cut corporate and oil extraction tax income, which is not a favorite of the people, which was not a choice of the people, and that cost us millions and millions of dollars. It costs us $24 million a month right now. It costs us a total in the 2-year biennium that we're in right now, a projected total of $530 million total in the 2 years. Now, what could we have done with that money? Could we have made some headway on property tax? Could we at least have kept the 12% buy down? Well, of course we could. And we would be less dependent on sales tax as well, which is an imbalanced tax that adversely affects low-income and middle-income individuals as well. So I think there are other ideas, of course, but at the base of this is good governance, common sense budgeting, responsibility to the people, and looking at who you serve. 80% of the money from the oil extraction tax cut and the corporate income tax cut went out of state. So perhaps property taxes are better in Oklahoma or in Texas these days, but that doesn't help us here. So I think governments work best when there's a balance of ideas and when there's a balance of power. And that particular bill was, the tax cut bill was pushed through in the last days of the session by a supermajority that basically can control the outcomes at the legislature. So one of the things that we can do to hold property tax down is elect people who want to do that and who will do what they've promised the people.
Thank you. Lori Beth, what can the state of North Dakota do to control the increasing property taxes?
Everything Mary says.
Okay.
I think that the issue with the elderly in the state and property tax is really something we should very much take to heart. Our elderly people set up the system and have been living here and paying taxes for their whole life. And so having more respect for the elderly and property tax is something we really do need to take concerns of and think of it through that perspective and through that lens. I believe we need a balanced system of sales taxes, income taxes, and property taxes. And the one that hits most people is that big bill you get on your property tax. The cents and dollars and cents you pay on your sales tax, those you just do and you don't notice. But it's that big check, that big buyout that you have to pay when it comes that really makes it feel bigger than the rest. We don't ever accumulate how many cents we pay all together in a year for sales tax. And the income tax is the third way for us to generate income, but most importantly, the corporate taxes. That money that's going out of state from corporations, we have a beautiful environment here. We are blessed with the energy, oil, and production in the state that can fund things in our state and can be contributing more to the state. And the buy downs and the tax things that have been done in the past really need to be relooked at so that we can prioritize the needs of the citizens, the homeowners of the state, the renters of the state.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you. This is a question. I like taxes, which not that I like taxes, but I like tax policy because it's very complicated. I think in terms of the property tax funds schools, counties, parks, and cities. And at the same time, those are really the people that serve you every single day. They're the people that guarantee your water's clean and the garbage is picked up. And oftentimes they're mandated to do certain things by the legislature. One of the things local governments have complained about for decades is unfunded mandates. And if every time the state required a local government to do something, they funded it, we would not have the property tax crisis. So if the state and federal government fully funded every mandate that they require of local government, we would not have a property tax crisis. I think the area that I'm most concerned about right now is the school funding formula, because we are not adequately funding our K-12 education And because there's been an increase in enrollment, foundation aid payments were frozen this last year, and that's going to be a major hole, and the risk is the property taxes could go up, although there's frozen in the formula, so they can't. But the realities of it are, we are not adequately funding K-12 education today, and over the next 2 years without additional funding, that is going to be a problem. So where can the money come from? Mary and Lori Beth both talked about, the corporate tax and the income tax. Income tax is interesting. Is if you earned, we cut your income tax in 2015. If you earned $50,000 as a household, do you know how much you got? $10. Now, most people didn't notice that. You didn't notice that in your bill probably. But if you earned $1 million, you got $5,000. And so it really disproportionately hurt the richer you are. And the income tax is the fairest. The thing that surprised me most going door to door is I'll bet 20% of the people will say, we need to raise the oil extraction tax. And people are actively saying, we need to raise the oil extraction tax, return it to the level that the people voted on, the 6.25, and that is the level that the people of this state voted on. And I've been really surprised that people are saying, address my property tax by funding mandates and by raising the oil extraction tax. Oil's a one-time harvest. And oil is something that the companies are currently doing very well. The price of oil today is about $70 a barrel. It was $70 because I looked this morning. The cost of production is between $20 and $25 a barrel. The oil companies are making good profit. They can afford this. Oil taxation does not impact production rates, as was sold in 2015. What does is the price of oil, which is totally driven by world markets. So I think we have to have an honest discussion about the oil extraction tax. And that's an important one. I think we'll have interesting discussions about other taxes. The gas tax is being talked about right now, raising the gas tax for roads and bridges, and also the tobacco tax is being talked about. I think taxation will be, we have the second lowest tobacco tax in the nation. We don't tax the vapors, the new electronic cigarettes at all, and that's bad tax policy. And so we need to do some additional tax reviews.
Thank you. On to question number 3. Looks like Lori Beth, it's your turn. Do you support the current higher ed funding formula, and why are we lowering the number of faculty while increasing FTE count in the systems office?
Could you please repeat
Sure.
that, especially the second half?
And support the higher ed funding formula, and why are we lowering the number of faculty while increasing the FTE count in the systems office?
The higher education funding formula is very complicated, and one of the things that it's based on, is my understanding, is doesn't take in just full-time students anymore, and that varies between the institutions because of the online credits, dual credits, and some of those parts that is raising the head count at the different institutions. And that most institutions have a baseline of what they need to fund to provide the services in higher education for the students who are attending there. So it is a complex formula in some institutions, and it may not be on parity with all the different institutions in the state. So that's my understanding of the higher education funding formula right now. The lowering of the faculty in the systems office, I'm not as clear about that at this particular time, but I do know that the education crisis in higher education is really hitting hard, and I'm really concerned about that. And I may not have the answers in the formula funding or the systems office funding, but we've lost a lot of important faculty members in the state universities. About 700 faculty members, many of them tenured, who bring a wealth of information to the state, wealth of knowledge to the students that they are serving and the state that they're serving. And the budget cuts that happened from the governor's office, 20%, took a lot of important people out of the institutions, and we are probably not providing the quality of education that those students need, deserve, and their tuition didn't go down. We cut hundreds of people. Did that affect the students? No. So I think that we really need to take a look at what's been happening and put value back in higher education and make education a priority again, and look at all those institutions and the services, and the priority needs to be serving students, the state, the communities, and that's what higher education is about, and it's very sad. My son is a sophomore. Last summer I took a look at how many of his classmates, friends, peer group were attending North Dakota institutions. It was dismal. It was 4 out of 20. So some of them have come back, but they're not here. The loss of students at NDSU this fall, 700 students, that's a tragedy. Where are they going? Well, I tried to figure that out last week after the third week head count was out. Looks like a lot of them went to private or out of state. So what did we gain? What have we gained? What higher ed needs to be, and the priority needs to be the people working there, the faculty. I don't like the word staff because I think that undercuts the valuable roles that the professionals in student services and other roles that interact with our students there, but those people are gone or missing. I have the graduate students who are teaching the classes, are the big classes. Our kids going to higher education, are they getting the quality of education that they're signed up to pay for, their parents are paying for? If they're out of state or they're coming back, higher education, I think, is a big bulk of what our future of our state is, to be training minds and doing the knowledge for the kids and the people. And it's not about, and we need an educated workforce, we need educated voters, we need educated people to be running and taking care of every generation. And so I really think that I may not have the specific answers to the way that question was worded, but I have a passion for higher education, and I see that we are not doing what we deserve, not what was set up in the Constitution of this state. Because the institutions of higher education were part of the constitutional dream of the people who came here, who started our state. Those many institutions, many people think there's too many, are located around the state to serve the different parts of the state. The people who founded this state believed in higher education. And I believe that the governor and the people that are here right now need to reinforce that and get back to what the roots were. And that's in higher education. And we need to properly fund our higher education in North Dakota.
Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Like Lori Beth, I am no expert on the higher ed formula because it is really complicated. And if you're not on that committee, it's very hard to understand. I think that the efforts to clearly define and link the two major research universities together and appropriately fund the research that's being done out of Grand Forks and Fargo is critical. Because with the first round of cuts that we've faced over the last 2 years, we've seen major brain drain in the valley because people are moving off to both assure that their research is viable and is alive, and that many people are taking the opportunities because they don't think there's any hope for expansion of higher ed. And I think, so you start to cut, and then you ask for another 10 to 15% cut. I mean, it's a demoralized culture on our major universities, and I think our small universities are feeling it to some degree, but the research universities, I think, have been gutted. And I think that's a crisis because that's going to be a workforce challenge in the long run. We're not going to keep our youth, like Lori Beth said. And I think the laying off of teachers makes getting classes more difficult for students, finishing degrees, increasing their student loans. There's a whole number of ramifications that happen. Now, when this question was read, was the first time I heard that there'd been increased FTEs in the systems office. And I went, oh, I didn't know that. But I know that now, and I think that is the systems office, for those of you who don't know, is the administrative branch in Bismarck that makes administrative decisions, so they're not the direct educators. And if that administrative branch is growing while we're cutting direct service staff at the university, that is a grave injustice, and we will go looking at that. That is absolutely wrong. If there's a percentage cut for every university, there needs to be a percentage cut at the systems office too. And I think that I think higher ed's in a crisis. And if we go another 2 years with reductions like we've seen over the last 2 years, we're going to have huge long-term workforce problems, worse than we already have. We have workforce shortages in many critical areas. And we need an educated society. You can't have a civilized world without education, and we have to have it.
Thank you. Mary?
I agree with the comments that you've heard already, and I'm sad when I see what's happened to our universities and to other parts of our educational system. It's been cut. And you cannot have a great state if you don't have great universities. I mean, going door to door in District 21, where there are many faculty members and administrative folks, is just saddening. I had one woman say that she only makes $23,000 a year and that she hasn't had a raise in 3 years, but she's taken on the jobs of 2 other people who have left at NDSU. And the faculty is demoralized, the leadership is demoralized. We have lost some of our best people. President Bershani mentioned to us at the legislature that he worked really hard to get 7 top flight academic folks into NDSU, and that he's lost them all because of the budget cuts. Now, I have a wonderful little niece from Virginia who has loved NDSU her whole life and has wanted to come here, and she started at NDSU this season. And I just didn't have the heart to tell her what was going on at the legislature because I was ashamed as a North Dakotan what we were doing to our universities. And the saddest thing is that it didn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen. And regardless of the system we have, it's really the outcome that's important. And the outcomes come from adequate funding. Again, if we hadn't self-impoverished North Dakota by making irresponsible governing decisions and cutting taxes we did not have to cut, we would have the millions of dollars that it takes to maintain the faculty, to maintain the smaller class sizes, to maintain the research, which we've lost and has cost us millions of dollars, to say nothing of the talent that went with it. So I think that as we look at needed changes, we certainly should address any manipulation in statistics or figures that we're seeing, but we also have to look overall at what our state needs for quality of life for people. In Tennessee, they're giving 2 years of free education. In New Jersey, they're giving free education. And instead of using our resources that we have in ways that would support education, would allow for expansion of our workforce, would allow students that otherwise cannot afford to get higher education, we're negatively impacting the very institutions that support us all. And I would love to have leadership that looks with vision at the future and what we need really to expand our institutions and the quality of them for the benefit of all our citizens. We're sitting on a lake of oil. We've seen in the last 2 days the Petroleum Council meeting and being positive about the future for all of us. We have the Legacy Fund to look to. I think we should have a major emphasis on not cutting our education, but solidifying it and making it high quality and more available to all of our citizens.
Very good. Thank you, ladies. As we come through our last half an hour, 2 minutes seems reasonable. We have some flexibility tonight. Please don't feel like you have to use all of your minutes either. So with that in mind, next question will be Kathy Hogan, first chance at it. What would you propose to increase access to mental health and addiction services? And how does your background prepare you for this challenge?
That's pretty, that's
was
pretty,
not planned.
you can answer it. It wasn't even a plan. Obviously, my professional background is I've worked in behavioral health for 50 years. I started in '68. I think this year, during the interim, we've received a comprehensive study called the Human Services Resource Institute study, which outlines the comprehensive vision of what we should have. And like I said at the beginning, we're about 20% there. Over the last 4 years, we've made some major additions. We have medication-assisted treatment now for people who need it. Medications called Suboxone and Vivitrol are now available, and about 1,400 people have received those through a voucher system that's available in Rugby and Valley City. It's available throughout the whole state. So we've added little pieces of the puzzle. The Free Through Recovery program, which is really diverting the people who are currently in the state corrections system coming home with a substance abuse problem, are getting a case manager, housing assistance, employment assistance, and treatment assistance. And if you have a comprehensive system, we know that we can address the disease of addiction. We know how to do it, we know what pieces need to be done, and we've demonstrated that it works. Our success rate in Free Through Recovery has been stunning. The trouble is only about 1 in every 30 people who need it have access to it. So we do not have enough of it. We know how to do it, we know what needs to be done, we just need to broaden the parameters. The thing that worries me the most about the behavioral health crisis right now is the suicide situation. We have the highest per capita suicide rate in the nation. And you know, I read the newspaper, and this elderly couple who do a suicide pact because they have no place to go and they have no assistance. The woman in Grand Forks who kills her 3 children and then commits suicide because she's so hopeless. There is no excuse that we have no system. The shooting of Officer Mosier in North Fargo was a man who was asking for help because he was clinically depressed and had psychiatric problems and couldn't get help. And so this is a real human survival issue. And if we are able to continue to expand those services, we know what needs to be done. We have not had the political will and the money to do it. I'll take your thunder. Last session, we asked for $28 million to fund the core services. We got $300,000. So we know what we need, but there's no political will to make it happen. In early September, the Interim Human Services Committee is asking for another $21,000 to expand services now. We'll see if that goes. But without services, those 29 people who need recovery support services are still not going to get them. And they're still going to be in our jails, and they're going to be in our homeless shelters, they're going to be on our streets. We know how to fix the problem, we just don't have the political will to do it.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, I want to give Kathy tremendous credit because she doesn't take it for herself. The bills that totaled $28 million came out of her Interim Human Services Committee, and she brought together a majority of Republicans along with Democrats and agency people to come out with 6 to 8 bills that passed unanimously out of that committee. I mean, this is unheard of, that you can get bipartisan support for bills that are going to cost $28 million. But she did it. But the will to implement the things that we need to do, according to people that we have paid to do the Schulte report and the HRSI report, these are people hired by the state that told us what needed to be done and how to do it. But when it came to appropriating the money to get the job done, the political will was not there. So that's really what needs to change. We have all the information we need to have an adequate behavioral health system, including treatment for suicides, opioids, seriously mentally ill. But right now, the mentally ill are getting, 9% of the mentally ill are getting served. I mean, that's unconscionable, unconscionable. And it affects so many other things in our society. It affects families. It affects the rate of domestic violence. It affects the rate of homicides. It affects the rate of suicides. We had a worker at Southeast Human Services Center who followed a person who was turned away for services out to the parking lot and took a gun out of his hand that he had pointed to his head. Now, that should never happen. In the shooting of Officer Mosier, the individual who shot him, who was in a domestic situation with his family, had gone to get services and been turned away. I mean, in a state that values its citizens, we will find the resources to serve the people who are most in need and most vulnerable. And as far as the background to deal with it, I mean, Kathy didn't mention that she was 18 years as the director of Cass County Social Services. And I have a sociology and psychology education as well, and have done deinstitutional litigation in the area of developmental disabilities, and I worked in a mental institution. And I have a passion in this area, and it's a broad-based need that we certainly can address, and we have good people, I think, who will do it. We just have to keep insisting until it's done.
Thank you. Lori Beth.
The mental health crisis, as I've become more and more aware of, working with these two lovely ladies is such a priority, and we're on the brink of making some legislative change and getting the state government and the people more aware of that and more willing to see how important it is that funding goes in that area and see that funding is a solution to some of the problems. My own background, yes, I've had addiction classes with a counseling degree and worked with people that have suffered from addiction, and it's not an easy fix. It's not just a pill that stops it. It's a lifestyle change. It's a permanent lifestyle change. One of the things that we're seeing or hearing a lot about in the Fargo community is the school systems, and the lack of safety is kind of the way it's been addressed. But we have students that are coming to school insecure and acting out, maybe we'll use that term, but what is their home environment? And so dealing with and having a state that deals with mental health issues may make things easier for the school system, and the trickle-down effect of mental health issues and how it affects families and multi-generations. We all know that addiction goes through many generations, and if we can stop it now, that's going to help the future, and that's why I'm running, is to help the future. And we look at these things and programs that we can stop mental health issues now, and with prevention programs, with reintervention programs, we can save the next generation. We can make changes for our kids, for our teachers who don't really want to have to address these issues in their classroom, and they would much prefer to be dealing with content areas. So I think that it's really important that our state invests in this, and our state acknowledges it, and especially in the rural areas of the state. I mean, we're blessed to live in Fargo, where there are many mental health counselors and resources that are available, but that might not be in Maddock, North Dakota. And there might be issues in that area, and people that would have to travel an hour or 2 hours to get the services that they need. And that is a specific issue with a state our size and a state with as much rural communities and residents that live in the rural areas. So when we look at the mental health status of the state, it is important, and it's important that we do it at a statewide level because of the differences between the urban and the rural areas of the state, because of the importance of next generation and the people who are currently suffering from these issues.
Thank you. Next question, since we've talked a little bit about trying to mix up the theme here, this is about the Legacy Fund and the fund interest. The specific question is, should Legacy Fund interest be used for one-time or ongoing expenses? And please give examples. And I believe it's Mary.
No.
Okay.
Our legacy fund is just that, and currently we're pouring some of that interest money into the general fund, and that's not really how it was intended to be spent. Here we have an opportunity with the legacy fund to do great things. We should be engaging our people in ideas and visions for the future of the state. What do we need? What can we do? What long-term special projects that are not ongoing daily needs should we be delving into? This is a particularly wonderful obligation to have, to be able to look at what we might do with that money. But it's not to pay the bills with. It wasn't meant to be that way, and that's the way it was partially used, at least the interest of it last time, so in the last session. So it's like in a family where you have a bank account with a goal to do something that's important, something that's consequential. And I think it's a real opportunity to look beyond what we need to do for our state on a day-to-day basis and have some creativity and some vision, and we shouldn't let it trickle away into the general fund.
Thank you. I'll state that question again for Lori Beth. Should legacy fund interest be used for one-time or ongoing expenses? And please give examples.
I don't think that the legacy fund should be used for the general fund for ongoing expenses. I don't think it's just a slush fund for our everyday expenses if we go over our bills. I think it is set up as a special interest group, a special needs kind of thing, a special thing for our future. I sort of look at it as the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and that we have that there, and we can strive to get to the goals of what would be there. Future-looking, things that we are going to invest in for our future. Most of my ideas would come for things for children, for this generation, keeping kids in the state, bringing attractions to the state, or bringing something besides just working in the oil wells, but bringing people to our state, and maybe more tourism things. I made a joke one time, maybe we could build our own Mount Rushmore, and the tourism industry in South Dakota is amazing, and how it affects and how it lowers the prices of things in South Dakota is pretty amazing when you get millions of people coming to see those 4 presidents. But I think that it should be used for a special purpose, a special purpose that's going to advance the interest of the state, futuristic in a sense, but it should be for projects that will help the children and the youth of our future.
Very good. Kathy?
The Legacy Fund is a really interesting concept, particularly as it relates to the Bank of North Dakota, because we're the only state in the nation with a bank, and we've done some very creative work, particularly in the area of student loans and infrastructure kind of work. When we had the housing crisis, the Bank of North Dakota was very innovative in getting access to building, expanding accessible and affordable housing in the West. And I think if we looked at using the fund almost like a bank, so it could be the bonding for our infrastructure projects. I think the bonding, so that if a city wanted to build something, they could, instead of bonding with a bank, where they might have to pay a 4 or 5% interest rate, we could bond for a 1% interest rate. So you don't you don't use your principal, but you get a much lower rate, which lowers the bonding cost for local government. So I think there's some very creative options that we could use for the legacy fund. I think it's got potential to additionally provide additional relief for student loans in that way if it was partnered with the bank, so that we could lower our student loan rates by a percentage for people who stay in the state. I think that's good investment in keeping people here. I think the infrastructure bonding is something that we should clearly look at. And an idea that has been floating in my head is assuming marijuana is a very difficult thing to manage financially. And if the Bank of North Dakota could become the financer for marijuana, particularly if recreational marijuana passes, the state of California has done major work on this issue, we could stabilize and have a third wing where you'd have a stable financial source of income as a financing arm. And it's very complicated, but I think there's some creative finance opportunities with Legacy Fund and with the bank.
Very good. Okay, we'll take one more question before we do our closing round. So we're going to pick a really general one. So this will address your creativity. What is the biggest challenge in North Dakota today, and how will you propose to fix that? And I believe we start with Lori Beth this time.
A few weeks ago, I was on the Petroleum Council tour, and the issues on the western side of the state are workforce issues. And I think that is for the whole state, is how do we get people to believe in North Dakota, to come to North Dakota, to stay in North Dakota. And I think that should be a high priority, and I think that's where we should be looking at things. How do we get more people into the state and keep them here and make them be happy and feel like they're having a good quality of life when they live in North Dakota?
Kathy.
I think the next legislative session, the biggest challenge is going to be the budget. We've talked about higher education, behavioral health. We have K-12 kinds of issues. We have a budget crisis because we have cut taxes so much. So we have to look at both the revenue side. I don't believe there's any real fat left to cut, and that we need to commit to maintaining Medicaid expansion, because we need to have Medicaid and health coverage for the 30,000 people covered on Medicaid expansion, and to stabilize our budget so we're not going into the legacy fund. Like Mary said, we really need to address the financial crisis we've been put in by the massive tax cuts given to people.
And Mary.
Well, I agree with Kathy that the budget really is the practical biggest challenge that's facing us, but we've talked a little bit about that already. And so I think that another big challenge is keeping up with the greatness of our state. I mean, we have really limitless potential. If we do it right and we govern sensibly and ethically and smartly, we could do any number of things. We could have, as Pamela Anderson and others of us who signed on, give the last year of education free to people who complete the early part of their education, either at community colleges, tech colleges, or our universities. We could do many things that other states couldn't even dream of affording for our own people. But to do that, I think the challenge that overall thinking globally is a big one, is we really have to have the people in leadership that can think big, who are smart, who have experiences, who do not reject research and information, and other ideas from other places, but who welcome them and say, how can we apply concepts to us that will make us better and an example to the nation? I think too often what I've seen in the legislature is an attempt to reach mediocrity at any cost. I mean, when people in the legislature are told that we are 34th in something in the country, they go, that's good. We're not too high. We're not too low. That's okay. You know, instead of taking the opportunities that may be in our future in this state with our one-time harvest of oil and our continuing richness of agriculture and our work ethic of our people, and saying, what can we do that hasn't been done? What can we do because we have opportunities that other places do not, that might show leadership to other states and our country and the world? And so I think that even though the budget is something that crushes us and faces us in the next session, that what's really important for the citizens to do is bring people into leadership in education, in government agencies, and for sure in elected capacities in our state and legislature that can think big, that have a commitment to the people of North Dakota, and who have both the vision and the intellectual and educational abilities to make North Dakota as fabulous as it can be. I mean, we have an amazing future and an opportunity that we really shouldn't forego. Let's try to be the best we can be and be an example of good leadership and stewardship to others.
Thank you. So for the closing round, I would expect, and I hope to hear why voters should vote for you, and maybe talk about some of your accomplishments or some of your plans when and if you're elected. So I think Kathy starts with closing round.
Well, I'd appreciate your vote and your electing me, because I really feel honored to serve. Going door to door, it's just so humbling to see the people that I meet each day. And actually, I like campaigning more than I like legislating, and they all think I'm nuts. But it's the people that live in my neighborhoods and around me that I really am attempting to serve. But I really want to try to build an economy that works for everyone. Everyone should benefit if we're working together as true community. We need to provide, and we need to commit to providing high-quality service. Not just have a program, but let's do it well. As Mary said, we have the ability, if we commit to doing it and stop saying mediocrity is okay. We need to strengthen our communities, our families. I worry about the single mothers who are alone, the parents needing childcare that's so outrageously expensive and difficult to get. We need to acknowledge our problems and work together to do them so that every single citizen in this state has the opportunity to reach their own individual American dream. The people of District 21 are so stunning, and so many of them in the audience are here. And we really work together well locally. We just need to do that as a city and as a county and as a state, because I think together we can really, really assure that North Dakota 50 years from now is stronger and healthier than it is today, and I think that's my commitment.
Thank you.
You know, we've talked a lot about North Dakota generally, and the three of us are always talking about our district, and we haven't done that much about that. But what I would like to do is make life better for the people of District 21, because by doing that, I think we can make things better for people all over the state. We have the poorest district in the state of North Dakota, and that's including the counties that have Native American reservations. Our rate of poverty, individuals below 200% of poverty, is 46.4%, and the state average is 26%. In District 21, we have 16.4% of people with a disability. In the state, we have 10.8%. We have the future capacity to actually wipe out poverty in our state. And I think dedicating ourselves as we do to making life better through expanded human services and meeting basic needs and assuring access to opportunity and equal access to justice and equality of economic opportunity for the people of District 21, actually everyone will benefit. So with my teammates Kathy Hogan and Lori Beth Hager, I hope to continue to represent District 21 in the legislature. I promise to use my education, experiences, expertise, empathy, enthusiasm, and energy to ethically ensure the best benefits, services, and outcomes for our area and for our state. You can be assured that I will work hard, be prepared, and listen to you and to the people of North Dakota. I will resist and combat those who put their greed over your needs. I will work collectively, collaboratively, and cooperatively to develop policies, procedures, and laws that will positively impact the lives of North Dakotans. I will advance economic opportunity, equality, fairness, and justice, while protecting North Dakota's prosperity and preserving and utilizing our resources in responsible ways for the betterment of our people and our future. I would consider it a privilege to be reelected, and thank you so much to the League of Women Voters, to our community representatives here, to the City of Fargo for their resources, and Cable One for their viewing.
Thank you. And Lori Beth, you get to close off the evening.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank everyone who's here tonight, the League of Women Voters, Robin, our moderator. Especially, I'd like to thank the two ladies who've been with me on this journey since January, and my husband, Pete. Mary and Kathy are beautiful mentors. When Carolyn and these two would come to my door in the past several years, I kind of said, someday, maybe me, I want to be just like them someday. Well, someday came a lot sooner than I was expecting. I got a little more frustrated with things that are going on in our world and in our state. And I think I can make a difference. And I think I had this idea in high school that there was another representative, my girlfriend's dad. And I thought, oh, that might be kind of fun someday. Someday is now. I look forward to being a representative in District 21. I have slept so comfortably knowing that these ladies have represented me, and I hope I can come close to the standards that they've set. Why am I running for elective office? I'm running to be your House of Representative. That's what I want to be. I want to represent people, the working people of our district, of our state. I want to represent parents with young children who may utilize food stamps or energy assistance to make their ends meet. I want to represent homeowners for whom property taxes, utilities fees account for much of their paychecks. I want to represent elderly and retired individuals who depend on Medicare for their medical needs or Meals on Wheels so that they don't go hungry. I want to represent persons with disability who rely on Medicaid or various transportations or other social services and accommodations. I want to represent veterans and Veterans Affairs issues so that they don't go through long lines, long waits, and red tape to get the services that they need to survive, especially our homeless veterans. And of course, my passion is representing our college students of our district and across our state who are incurring considerable debt and will spend years repaying college student loans and may encounter academic or other program cuts in the current budget of higher education in North Dakota. And I also would like to rep each and every one of us who is impacted by increasing and the high cost of health insurance and health care expenses. That's what I want to do as your representative in Bismarck, and that's what I want to do for the people. Because I believe government is meant for people, and I have so enjoyed meeting people on the doors or at public events since January, and I hope to meet many more and represent each and every one of you in Bismarck. Thank you for your time. I would appreciate your vote in November.
Well, thank you, District 21 candidates. Thank you for running for office. I can say personally that it is one of the greatest rewards in life. I can also want to thank our audience members for these great questions and getting engaged, because that's what makes government and our world go round. In closing, I guess I would say thank you for everybody that made this happen, and most importantly, please vote on or before November 6th. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.